Thank you all for being here this afternoon and for joining us for the final talk in this year's Chancellor's Colloquium Distinguished Speakers Series. The Colloquium series, as you know, because I've seen many of you who come often to these presentations, invites renowned leaders in government, industry, the performing arts, and higher education to engage with our campus community about their work and about major issues that we face in higher education, but also in the country in general. And of course, around the world, we had many speakers who extended their talks to incorporate those concerns. I'm so pleased today to have with us the President and William T. Golden Chair of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, Dr. Leslie Berlowitz. Leslie will speak about liberty and learning. Afterwards, she will be joined by Maureen Stanton, Vice Provost of Academic Affairs, who will ask a few questions and then will moderate the discussion with the audience. First, I would like to introduce our moderator this evening, Vice Provost Maureen Stanton, and then I will introduce our speaker. Maureen joined the UC Davis faculty nearly 30 years ago and has become one of the world's most influential evolutionary ecologists. Maureen is a recipient of the UC Davis Top Teaching Prize in 2005 and was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 2012. Maureen's research focuses on how plant and animal populations adapt to environmental change caused by natural processes or human activities. This is critical knowledge for predicting the long-term consequences of climate change, biological invasions, and other alterations of global ecosystems. So, Mo, thank you so much for agreeing to play this role today. Thank you. Now I'm very honored to introduce our distinguished guest, Dr. Leslie Berlowitz. Leslie is the first woman to serve as Chief Executive Officer of the Academy and was named its 45th president in 2010. The Academy was founded in 1780, and I was really impressed myself when I visited the building to look at all of the signatures and acceptance letters of the many, many members the Academy has recognized. And I would like to say that among the many members early in the Academy, you can find Benjamin Franklin and George Washington. It's a great organization. It's an independent policy center whose membership includes scientists, scholars, artists, actors, policymakers, and very accomplished individuals from all sides of life. In this critical role at the Academy, Leslie has been at the forefront of recent efforts to assess the state of the humanities and social sciences and their impact on the country's education system, economic competitiveness, and cultural diplomacy. Before joining the Academy in 1996, Leslie served as Vice President at New York University. So it is a great honor, Leslie, to have you here with us. And I will now turn the stage over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor Katehi, for your very warm introduction. I'm delighted to be here at the University of California, Davis, whose extraordinary work spans from strength in culture to strength in viticulture. As Nobel Prize-winning scientist Alexander Fleming once said, "Penicillin cures, but wine makes people happy." When Chancellor Katehi invited me to travel from the rocky, cold coast of New England to visit this beautiful campus, and the weather has just been extraordinary today, what a greeting, I was very happy indeed, and that's even before the wine reception. So it is my honor to be with you today. The title of my talk, Liberty and Learning, is taken from James Madison's 1822 letter to W.T. Barry, a Kentucky congressman, senator, and Andrew Jackson Postmaster General. In praising the state of Kentucky's new plan for a general system of public education, Madison wrote, quote, What spectacle can be more edifying or more seasonable than that of liberty and learning, each leaning on the other for their mutual and surest support? Like so many of his revolutionary colleagues, including his friend and mentor Thomas Jefferson and his political rival John Adams, Madison believed that a well-rounded education and a more general diffusion of knowledge would be the best security against crafty and dangerous encroachments on the public liberty, unquote. To preserve the public liberty, Madison also championed education as the bedrock of democracy and argued for the creation of learned institutions, which he believed ought to be the favorite objects with all people. One such learned institution, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, was founded in 1780 by John Adams, James Bowdoin, John Hancock, and several of Madison's revolutionary colleagues, precisely for the purpose of advancing, quote, the wealth, peace, independence, and happiness, unquote, of the young republic. Like Madison, the founders of the American Academy certainly understood the importance of instrumental learning. In its early years, the Academy assisted in the pursuit of useful knowledge by publishing surveys of the soils, plants, and minerals of North America, the raw materials that would be the basis for America's growth and prosperity. But they also left a legacy of support for curiosity-driven scholarship that continues to inspire work across this nation and the innovations that we draw from. Adams, Jefferson, Franklin, and Bowdoin were practical men. They were lawyers, businessmen, journalists, statesmen. Adams was also a farmer. I think he would have loved it out here. And they were very practical. They understood the importance of imagination in the arts as well as in sciences to the national enterprise, and they brought this conviction to their government work, which helped to shape democracy. The American Academy was founded before there was a country. In fact, in 1780, they were just working on the Constitution, both of the United States and of Massachusetts. And Adams wrote into the Constitution of Massachusetts, which he was able to be the most persuasive author, that every state should have an academy. He wanted to get into the American Constitution that every state should have an academy. That didn't quite make it into the American Constitution, but he was able to keep it in the Massachusetts Constitution. I've been thinking about these men and their commitment to curiosity, to the sciences and the humanities, and I fear that America is losing sight of that broad intellectual ideal. As you all know, curiosity-driven research and education is an easy target for policymakers in times of fiscal constraint. In recent months, general knowledge has been challenged from several angles. Congress has debated the efficacy of funding the social sciences and very recently restricted the National Science Foundation for projects that will, quote, if they do not, quote, promote national security or the economic interests of the United States, unquote. One hopes that this will change in successive administrations, but it is a very instrumental and narrow definition of that is being imposed on the National Science Foundation, and there is some fear that it will also be imposed on the National Institutes of Health. It flies in the face of the peer-reviewed, broader, curiosity-driven way that we have carried out science and social sciences in this country. Other signs that alarm me. Some state governors have encouraged college students to avoid humanistic and social scientific disciplines. I mean, this raises to the state that a governor can say in one state that he thought students should be charged more to study history because it was not going to lead to a useful career. Some states have even instituted laws requiring colleges to post the incomes of their students 1 year after graduation, as if the immediate benefit of college education were that value 1 year out of college. I wouldn't have done very well if that had been the way my life had been evaluated. And I don't know how any of you feel about that. Now, of course, the public's reasonable desire for accountability is something that is more and more being spoken about with the high costs of education. But this kind of calculation, 1 year out of college, is very misleading and even a self-defeating set of measures for education. Just as measuring teachers, K through 12, on the performance of their students can have dire effects on the curriculum. America's technical and cultural preeminence was not based on such a constricted and impoverished view of intellectual enterprise. Vannevar Bush, as chairman of the National Defense Research Committee and director of the Office of Scientific Research and Development, understood the importance of research to the economic and political well-being of this nation. He led or oversaw several unique major research projects designated specifically to ensure that America would prevail, most notably the Manhattan Project. But Bush also recognized that knowledge for the sake of understanding was the most important stimulus of discovery. Unpredictable, inconvenient, occasionally inefficient, such research and scholarship is the key to innovation, as Archimedes, Isaac Newton, and Alexander Fleming all would testify. In 1967, well after the World War II period in which Bush not only worked on the Manhattan Project, but also his work led to the creation of the National Science Foundation, he published a reflective and sobering book with the provocative title, Science is Not Enough, in which he wrote, "Knowledge for the sake of understanding, not merely to prevail, that is the essence of our being. None can define its limits or set its ultimate boundaries." Even as American Academy projects gather evidence on the practical importance of advanced research for government, industry, and civic culture, they also champion the pursuit of knowledge, as do most universities in this country. Knowledge for the sake of understanding, as well as knowledge for prosperity that's more direct. Earlier this month, the Academy released a new report, Arise 2, Unleashing America's Research and Innovation Enterprise. ARISE stands for Advancing Research in Science and Engineering. The report advocates for greater integration of theories, concepts, and applications from multiple scientific disciplines, biology, physics, medicine, engineering, computer science, to solve the complex problems of the 21st century. It offers recommendations to foster collaborative research between academia, universities, and industry. Chancellor Katehi was who, as she herself mentioned, is a fellow of the Academy. She was an important part of that study. That study leads us now to how do we implement that study, and an important challenge for all of us is how will we evaluate people who do interdisciplinary research? How will their careers move along in the spectrum? And these are new challenges to universities that I think none of us want to shrink back from. Next month, the Academy's Commission on the Humanities and Social Sciences will begin a multi-year public campaign to argue for the critical role of the humanities and social sciences to, quote, achieve long-term national good for our intellectual and economic well-being, for a stronger, more vibrant civil society, and for the success of cultural diplomacy. As a student of the late 60s and early 70s, the notion that the humanities would take up the challenge of industry, economic well-being, and military, diplomacy would have been something of a surprise. And yet it's clear to me, and I hope to many of you, that you can't argue for public support if you can't make the case for the public good, especially during constrained economic times. Both of these projects, the ARISE project and the Humanities project, advocate for the importance of research across the disciplines. Both acknowledge the need to combine disciplines, to merge them in new ways, to take the tools of science and the humanities to address grand challenges. And both also seek ways to nurture young talent and support senior faculty as they chart the frontiers of their fields together and make new alliances. As some of you may know, the Commission answers a bipartisan call from the United States Senators Lamar Alexander, a Republican of Tennessee, and Mark Warner, a Democrat of Virginia, and Representatives Tom Petri, Republican of Wisconsin, and David Price, Democrat of North Carolina. Their call to the Academy was to outline, quote, what are the top actions that Congress, state governments, universities, foundations, educators, individual benefactors, and others should take now to maintain national excellence in the humanities and social scientific scholarship, education, to achieve a long-term national goals for our intellectual and economic well-being, for a stronger, more vibrant civic society. Richard Broadhead, president of Duke University and a scholar of literature, and John Rowe, chairman emeritus of the Exelon Corporation, one of the nation's leading energy utility companies, co-chair a distinguished group on the commission. Business, academia, working together, critical to our view of how we have to move not from our silos into a greater constructive interplay. Among the members of this commission are Pauline Yu, Annette Gordon-Reed, and Tony Grafton from the humanities, social scientists Danielle Allen, Donna Shalala, Kathleen Hall-Jameson, scientists and engineers, Charles Vest, Norm Augustine, John Hennessy, business leaders including Jim McNerney of Boeing and Roger Ferguson of TIAA-CREF, and leaders in the arts and media, George Lucas, Ken Burns, John Lithgow, Billy Chen, and David Brooks, quite a large number of Californians represented in this group. The commission members have been active and engaged in this work for over 2 years. They have also sponsored forums around the country to collect testimony about the importance of the humanities and social sciences to local and ethnic communities, to advance research, to civic participation, to the education continuum, and to the nation's defense and international relations. Let me show you a few snippets drawn from these conversations.
The nature of human beings is to understand that we've had a past, to recognize that we are living in a present, and to hope for a better future. And one has to therefore be able to connect one's past to this present and to have an anticipation of a better future. One has to know something about how human beings have addressed the big issues before us in the past, how they address them now, and what the future might look like. And so, in a sense, the humanities and the social sciences are the most human of inquiry, because we are trying to understand that past, the relationship to the present, and the anticipation of the future.
Something that also really matters in America, where you can get students who are studying science who want to come into your literature class, that still remains an aspect of the American Academy, which isn't the case in Europe. And I think it's something we really have to hold on to, the idea that just because you want to become a doctor does not mean that you don't want to go down the corridor also and study the history of European painting. And that has actually mattered in America. If it were lost, I think it would be an extraordinary loss, not only for the American Academy or for the individuals involved, but for the entire society.
My tribe is known as a tribe of loss. In that loss, do we really realize what was taken away from us? In my opinion, it can be summarized in the word humanities. We have found that our people are not able to hold jobs because in many cases they don't know who they are, they don't have an identity, they have had a spirit taken away from them. And our success with our people comes when we are able to give that identity back to them, when we are able to give that spirit back to them, when we are able to give the humanities and provide them.
My mom came to this country when we left Cuba. She was bringing her degree with her. They ripped it up at the airport and said that she was not taking even her education with her. However, it's ridiculous because your education is not that piece of paper. It is what has made you, what has formed you, what all the immigrants that have come to this country have brought with them, and the strengths from their particular cultures that continues to weave their way into the fabric of this amazing nation that is growing by the day. And with every immigrant that comes into this country, we acquire their knowledge, their skills, their culture, and adds to the amazing culture that already exists here.
Perhaps ultimately the point is the promotion of that kind of tolerance, that degree of healthy self-doubt which Learned Hand used to remind us of by quoting Oliver Cromwell in his statement to the Scots, consider that ye may be mistaken. In fact, as somebody reminded me as early as lunch today, that after all was what Learned Hand called the spirit of liberty. And it's the spirit of liberty that the humanities are here to promote.
As a society, we tend to focus on bad news, and bad news is all around us. The humanities community has had to struggle with bad news for decades. I will give you a few factoids. 1/3 of all fourth graders in this country are reading even below a basic level of achievement. We do not compete well on international standards of reading. 1/3 of public high school students take history classes with teachers who are neither certified nor degreed in history. Those people who have advocated for STEM well over the past several years have pointed out that math teachers needed more training. Actually, history teachers are even less well prepared than our math teachers. And federal funding to support international training and education has been cut by 41% in 4 years. This at a time when we have been involved in wars in multiple sites around the world. We are not training people in language. We're not training people in area studies. We are running around looking for somebody who can translate a text because we're not building it into either our primary, secondary, or advanced degree institutions. The Academy Commission has uncovered reasons for optimism, nevertheless. There is an interested public, which is much broader and more diverse than they themselves thought. Over the past decades, many people in the humanities community looked at the scientific community and said, well, they've got their act together. Everybody's talking about STEM. Everybody's talking about the importance of science and technology, and we are being left off the page. The importance of the commission is to mobilize and draw on interested public to help move the policy community. You can't just talk about the bad data and hope that somebody in Washington is going to say, okay, we'll fix it, if nobody across the country is saying it needs to be fixed. We need to mobilize PTAs and libraries, cultural institutions, all of those institutions that you all love and benefit from, and yes, business, government, and the military to help make our case. Last October, Academy Fellow Daniel Day-Lewis introduced me to a young Army veteran named Johnny Jones. Johnny is in his late 20s, comes from the rural South, and lost both his legs in combat in Afghanistan. Daniel met Johnny while visiting Walter Reed Hospital, while he was researching for his own role in Lincoln. As a result of that meeting, Johnny himself appeared in that moving hospital scene in the film, if you've seen the movie. Johnny's duty in Afghanistan was to find and defuse IEDs, dangerous, heroic work based on the purest form of technical knowledge. Daniel introduced us because Johnny is now interested in the humanities as a liberal studies major at Georgetown University. His military training taught him how to perform the tasks of his very dangerous assignment. But he will tell you, modern soldiers are statesmen as well as technical experts. For this reason, Johnny emphasized to me the importance of cultural knowledge, communication skills, historical perspective, and ethical reasoning for the modern military. He speaks eloquently about the importance of humanistic knowledge to his mission, and he said he only wished he had learned about the world in school before he enlisted. I remember Johnny Jones whenever I hear a governor, a senator, a superintendent, a parent, or even a student question the importance of disciplines like anthropology, or political science, or history, or the classics. The truth is, we never know what piece of information will improve our security, our competitiveness, or our individual happiness. We never know which skills our next job will require. And so we will always need experts, teachers, and researchers to move the nation forward. And even those who are fraught with the job problems of today, looking for new jobs if they've been laid off, often can draw on their own sense of history and knowledge and enjoyment of literature as they are thinking about retooling for another profession. Since the publication of Rising Above the Gathering Storm in 2007, which was a report of the National Academies, the STEM disciplines, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, have received necessary increases in funding and attention. But as Norm Augustine, former chairman of Lockheed Martin and head of the Gathering Storm report, said at a recent meeting, quote, "One cannot live by equations alone," unquote. Norm, of course, as chair of the Gathering Storm, is chaired one of the nation's most influential reports on science. He is also a member of the Humanities Commission and equally dedicated to that work. One cannot live by equations alone. Note, I am not saying that this is a competition between STEM, the humanities, and social sciences. I'm saying this is an integrated problem. We need both. If you can't read, you can't do science. On the other hand, if you don't understand the meaning of how the scientific enterprise proceeds, critical thinking, evidence, you're not going to be able to be a good voter. So we need both together. Since that publication, the funding that STEM sciences have received has been impressive, but we have to find ways to also advocate for the humanities. China and Singapore have discovered that a workforce trained in the humanities can be more creative and innovative. They are transforming their educational systems to include the study of literature and the arts. Peking University has even created a department of Western classics to better understand what the Chinese perceive as the bedrock of our economy and culture. And other nations are following. Even British colleges have developed the British system is very narrow. They have, in recent years, rediscovered the liberal arts. This year, King's College London and University College London are both admitting undergraduates to new programs in the liberal arts. Why are we divesting from broad education when others who have envied our system of education for a century are moving in that direction? Is this the way we're going to be competitive? I ask you. In a recent survey of the Association of American Colleges and Universities, 78% of employees responded that they preferred job applicants knowledgeable about global issues and societies and cultures outside the US to train them for a global workforce. 80% favored employees with strong written and oral communication skills. And 82% responded that they preferred employees with civic knowledge, skills, and judgment. All of these are honed in the bedrock of the humanities. In other words, the humanities community has a world out there of allies, whether it's our military or it's our business community or our wish to be part of a competitive global environment. But those in the humanities community have got to join this argument. And I wonder if humanists themselves have been aggressive enough both to find a common voice and then to work with these other constituents to argue that our senators and congressmen are missing something. The Commission on the Humanities and Social Sciences and the campaign that will follow the release of the report will attempt to restore balance to the public conversation about American education. We're embarking on a journey that will not end with the report, but rather enunciate a set of principles that we're calling on all of you to help us carry forward. So when you listen to some of the testimonies of earlier forums that the Academy held, I hope you're inspired to think about what kind of forums you could hold right here at UC Davis, because we intend to work with humanities centers around the country and with other interested publics to try to get this conversation actively going in our society. And the report is meant to be provocative of what would be lost if we didn't have the humanities and social sciences. Let me share with you a few basic principles of our work. One, the humanities and social sciences provide Americans with the knowledge, skills, and understanding they will need to thrive in a modern, increasingly complex, technologically based society. For example, reading, writing, speaking, and analytic skills are the basis of career flexibility and lifelong knowledge. That the knowledge of history, civics, and social sciences will allow people to participate meaningfully in democracy. And without that knowledge, democracy cannot thrive. Think of the societies and countries when they were most eager not to have a democratic nation. Remove the university, remove the culture. Think of what is done subtly when we don't fund culture and we don't fund learning. It's self-removal. It's a very perverse idea. Finally, the qualities of mind, problem solving, critical analysis, and communication skills are common to all disciplines. The humanities and social sciences equip the nation for leadership in an interconnected world. They teach us about ourselves and about others. They enable us to participate in the global economy that requires understanding of diverse languages and cultures and sensitivities to many perspectives. They make it possible for people around the world to work together to address issues such as environmental sustainability and global health. 3, state and federal research and education budgets are currently stretched to fund more programs with fewer dollars, and we need a wider community of philanthropic individuals and foundations to invest in the humanities and social sciences beyond government. 4, we need to bring the humanities communities together to argue for the importance of these disciplines, as I suggested earlier. Each organization within the complex tapestry of the humanities and social sciences has a message. I hope that we can find some common messages as well as our individual messages. Each organization has a role in advancing the recommendations of the report, and we need to find a way to bring the whole education continuum together, from teachers of preschool to those doing advanced research in universities and institutes of advanced knowledge. Finally, teachers, scholars have to reevaluate the curriculum, pre-K through college, not in small boxes, but what are the competencies we hope young people will learn that they can build on to be more successful in high school? What do we hope people will learn in high school that will translate to college? We do a lot of costly remedial work in our country, which might be a place where we can actually begin to save some money if we created a clearer continuum between the sectors and welcome more actively in some institutions those people who are teaching in the earlier years. Finally, we need to engage with a broader public. Not every humanist or social scientist needs to be a public intellectual, but scholars have got to address many audiences, and they need to find ways to justify their work to larger audiences. As historian Anthony Grafton and Jim Grossman, executive director of the American Historical Association, wrote in an influential essay, "No More Plan B." In other words, the academic community must not see the value of their degree, their advanced degree, only in replicating themselves. There aren't going to be a glut of jobs available to be filled. People going through these disciplines have the right for their own faculty to work with them to think about the other things they might profitably do and how the whole society will benefit from their advanced training. We can no longer believe that our work is just reproduction, but also as contributors to the public culture and the private sector. Your humanities clusters here in the center are valuable models of this kind of interdisciplinary work, and I applaud you for it, and I think it's just the kind of thing that all undergraduates and graduate students will find a new sense of the value of their work and their disciplines. Most of all, the Commission wants to maintain the exemplary system of broad liberal arts education that is our nation's greatest export and calls for increased support for humanistic and social science research in every field. The larger funding problem will not be solved by making louder requests where there is little inclination to and fewer dollars to give. As my colleague and the co-chair of the commission, Dick Broadhead, said, quote, "The slogan, 'We have a value and you are apparently just not able to understand it,' unquote, is not a winner in the contest for public opinion." Scholars in the humanities and social sciences must begin to learn from the biological and physical sciences that they have to make the case, as STEM has, for building over the last 50 years since the creation of the National Science Foundation. Now it's 63 years since that creation. This is not easy to do. The humanities and social sciences are, of course, the disciplines of debate and dissent, and we would not want it otherwise, but they abhor slogans, and they cannot cure cancer or even blight in vines. But let us not forget that music and wine and letters make the most worthwhile life companions. As James Madison continued in his reflections on liberty and learning, he said, quote, "Throughout the civilized world, nations are courting the praise of fostering science and the useful arts," unquote. Madison was concerned that if we were going to compete, young America, with Europe, when he wrote these words, and we'd have to find a way to achieve what they were achieving in Europe. Today, we look to developments in China and other Asian nations, all of whom have now acknowledged the benefits of our kind of work, and we cannot afford to lose what we have already made us great. Thank you.
Leslie, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm not the only person in this room. I'm sure I'm not the only person in this room who had felt a visceral resonance with what you were saying about many of the themes that you presented today. The fundamental importance of curiosity-driven creative endeavor. That is truly one of our unique human attributes. But also, you're pushing us. You're pushing us to get out of our comfort zones, to reach out not only to other disciplines, say from STEM disciplines into the arts, and certainly the social sciences, but also from just trying to influence our co-scholars, our fellow scholars, to having an impact on society. So thank you. We're all incredibly grateful to the work that American Academy of Arts and Sciences is doing to champion the importance of higher education while also changing us. Now, I come from a STEM background, and to me, the notion that STEM can or should operate in any sort of isolation from the social sciences and the humanities is really kind of hard to fathom. You know, from just a biological or scientific standpoint, humanity is the most important ecological force on Earth. It is it is changing the geochemistry of our planet, the evolution of every species on our planet. How can we possibly understand those processes unless we understand human beings and our social systems? And those are the domains of arts and humanities. So thank you. I think it's an incredible message. I also feel, and I want to come back to a theme that you mentioned in your talk, and that has to do with how education in the K through 12 level, how we need to reach out there. I feel, I sort of call our current system the system of leave no child untested. And yet, even as I feel things have gotten much worse, I think of my own childhood where I didn't become a scientist because of the science classes I had in junior high or high school. What they taught me about the scientific method sounded so incredibly dull and boring. Who would ever want to do that? Where was the role of creativity? Similarly, I didn't feel I was well prepared for realizing that history teaches us about the future and that arts aren't just decorative, but they are probing ourselves. So given that, I'd really appreciate if you talk to us a little bit about what you think we can do or should do. What can we do to help break down these comfort zones, break down these disciplinary boundaries for younger students, the teachers who are teaching them?
Well, I was, in our commission report, we were very concerned with how each segment of the educational system lives within its own culture. So school teachers, many of whom have college and even master's degrees to be school teachers, go out of the system, and we no longer think of them as fellow academics, trying to bring to high school and then college the kind of people who can be successful in our institutions. They don't even talk about the humanities in K through 12. The humanities are a higher education construction, I think. Or a national construction when the NEH was created. In grammar school, we talk about reading, we talk about social studies, which I think combines history and civics, although one of those awful factoids is that civics isn't being taught anymore in at least more than half of the states in this country. Languages, foreign languages, which we consider part of the humanities, is absent in the schools. Now, each level of education, to some extent, is influenced by the one beyond it. If the medical schools stopped requiring organic chemistry as an entrance criteria, I wonder what would happen to the enrollment in organic chemistry. For years, I always thought it was the organic chemist who stood between a child's aspiration to be a doctor and their ability to get there. And I always wondered what criteria they were using, as the course always seemed beyond my ability. Similarly, if colleges some years ago gave up looking for foreign languages, so why are we surprised that high schools, hard put to meet their curriculum, would offer fewer foreign languages? If grammar schools could prepare the way, not in this endless, it's STEM or, but a series of competencies and literacies that people need to be successful, then I think we could work together on it. It would be interesting for a university curriculum committee to get a few high school teachers to come and even chat about it. It would be interesting to have graduate school faculties talk candidly both from not just in the disciplines of the humanities and social sciences, but in the medical and law and business schools about what these aspirations are. I often hear the opposite of this. Oh, humanities are important, so our medical school has an ethics course. Or business is so important. We are even offering some intercultural courses for, that's late. Medical schools should be down there encouraging K through 12. The PTA, parents, should be looking for this in our schools. The arts are no longer in our schools. Now, I know I'm being rather optimistic when I understand that the budgets of public education have been cut, and in many cities and states are so tied to the real estate taxes, and people are aging, and as they age, they're not interested in having higher real estate taxes, so some group of 5-year-olds will have arts in the school. But the long-term result of not giving that kind of opportunity to each next generation will create a very bifurcated society in which those people who have affluence will be able to provide some of these opportunities by taking their kids after school to museums, introducing the arts, in other words, supplementing the school. Most of the supplementing to schools I see around me are for sports. I see far less except if you come from certain cultures, for foreign language or for other disciplinary ideas. And I think we've got to get back in our schools. We've got to have the public will that we will not be in a society where affluence creates a bifurcated society and an elitist group who have that kind of culture and the rest who schools couldn't afford it. So it comes back to really an economic. Now, I don't like to see teachers not have the opportunity to come to lectures. We run lectures at the academy. Not every chair at every lecture is filled. Where are the school teachers coming to our lectures, feeling like they're not just guests because we're having a take a teacher to lunch program, but take a teacher into our departments, adopt them, care about them. It'd be amazing what they could do.
I think they must be so time limited. I know I tried to do an outreach program on evolution about 5 or 6 years ago. We really worked hard to invite teachers from the Davis and Sacramento school districts. We couldn't get any, and I don't know how much of that was because they're just so busy. Their class sizes are huge, their workload is tremendous, and how much of it may be a perceived separation, that we're being condescending somehow, or we expect that to be a one-way conversation instead of a two-way conversation.
Yeah.
I think that's tremendously important.
Can you imagine a tenure committee having a high school teacher on it?
That
would be a two-way conversation.
That'd be interesting. I do think, I've told many of my colleagues, many of my graduate students, that if you really understand the importance of your work, you should be able to explain it to an intelligent fourth grader. And that if you can distill it to that level, then you really have a better grasp of what you're trying to do.
And if we paid our school teachers adequately and we honored them adequately, as some countries do, then those people who are finishing PhDs in disciplines might feel very happy to be teaching as a career, which is what they said they wanted to do. But if you go into a school system where everything's meted out to you and you're not well paid and you're judged by somebody taking tests every week, then that's not a profession that people want to go into. So we've got to fix that somehow.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to make sure we have time for questions, but I want to just ask one more thing. Thinking about the work of the commission, what an amazing group. You read a set of the 52 names: humanists, social scientists, business leaders. And I personally, the story about Daniel Day-Lewis and Johnny Jones really caught me. What an important realization to realize that the modern soldier has to be a statesperson, a diplomat, and therefore needs to know history, cultural competencies, et cetera. So I'm wondering if you, as you listened to these discussions and read drafts of the report, what were some of the other arguments that these particularly that this diverse group of stakeholders made to really call for the importance of continued investment in humanities and social sciences. I'd love to hear some of those stories.
Well, there was a lot of discussion about civics, and one of the interesting discussions was about what kind of a jury would you like if you were suddenly found yourself being tried by your peers, and how would you like it if they didn't know how to think deductively, understand critically and logically the arguments, and make a considered decision, and that training in civics, in literacy, and in the scientific method would be very helpful for jurists. And I was very persuaded that I wouldn't want to go before a jury that was emotional. And
I have to say, I served on an almost month-long jury about 6 years ago, and it was a civil trial. The jurors, all of the jurors except for 3 of us, were under 35. There were 3 of us over 50. The key point of the trial was whether someone who had a serious injury would be likely a number of years later to have a re-experience of the injury. There was expert testimony on this, very convincing, top person in the field, et cetera, but he wasn't a very nice man. He was not well prepared as a witness. And it ended up, the 3 people over 50 were in support of the plaintiff, and the rest, the majority of the jury, just could not see the evidence. This guy's an expert. I don't care, we don't trust him. It was tough.
So evidence-based
Yes.
decisions is one very important part of our jury system.
You also mentioned George Lucas and something about the whys of technology.
George said that technology teaches us how, and the humanities teaches us why. But he talked very convincingly at commission meetings about the importance of learning history, because he said even cinema studies is based on knowing the history of the discipline of film, and as well as the history of our society. And anyone who's ever watched the beginning of the trilogy knows that in a far distant land, that Lucas was talking very much about the sweep of Western culture and history. So, in modern terms.
Thank you very much. And what I'd like to do is bring the house lights up a little bit, if we can, and just open up the meeting to questions for Leslie. I can only see these 3 lights. Okay. Yes, please speak up, because I can't see you if you're past the first row.
And give us their name.
I'm sorry, that's a little better. I saw a hand over here.
I'm curious what your thoughts are on how Common Core is going to affect the humanities, with just so many states in the nation rolling that out, and all the testing that's going to be done on computers with that, and the technology piece that's really being pushed that goes with that for the K through 12 schools.
A number of the members of the commission felt strongly that the Common Core was a very good effort by the governors to begin to think, what are the competencies we would like young people to have? I think it's yet to be told how well the testing will support the success of the core, because if students don't do very well on it over time, will it be sustained politically? And the notion that judging it by the first set of tests or the second set of tests, rather than having the patience to see that people will get better at it over time, and rather than, gee, the headline I could imagine, 80% of the students failed the test in X. So then becomes, what does a governor do? Put more money and more money to make sure they all pass? Or do we say, well, as it has happened in some states recently, we're eliminating that test? So I don't personally like to see all of education based on testing. Some people test well in some ways, and other people do well orally. It's more expensive. They have different modes of learning. And so I think it's the Commission applauds the effort, but wonders how patient we will be to really embed it in our system. What do you think?
It's interesting to... Sorry. Just from what I'm seeing as a parent, it seems that the Common Core is a really good idea, but it seems that it's sort of this hot mess that they're trying to put together really quickly. And I know that New York, who's several years ahead, said that there is a dip in the testing. So I'm afraid that, again, it's going to be test-driven as a way of saying that it's data-driven. And so I, too, share the concern of, are we going to be patient enough to see what's really going on after the sort of growing pains of changing over to it?
And I understand that a number of libraries across the country are working very hard to try to get materials into the hands of teachers, because there's one thing to have a set of competencies, and there's another step is having the materials you need to do the teaching, both available for teachers and for students, which will have a lot to do with the success.
Great question.
I
think who asks questions is going to be determined by the microphone, so thank you. Whoever that shape is back there that is handing out the microphone, thank you so much. And please introduce yourself, too, when you stand up.
I'm Margie Ferguson, and I'm in the English department, and I'm also going to be the incoming president of the MLA, the Modern Language Association, in December, and we have a new committee called K through 16 that is addressing just this. But I'm particularly concerned. I've been reading Diane Ravitch's objections to the Common Core, not just to the question of will we have enough patience to sustain it, but also to the very certain parts of the Common Core having to do with language arts, which James Coleman has really made a strong distinction between information-rich texts and fiction. And the change here, you're going to see it right in your kids' K and 3 classes, that there will be fewer stories and more what is defined as informational nonfiction. But in my fields, we question that distinction because we think reading has to include things in many genres. And the other part of the Common Core that is so depressing to those of us who work in language and literature is that foreign languages are not part of the language arts. They seem to be being handed over to the Defense Department and the definitions of what are strategically important languages. So it seems to me we didn't have a very long discussion of the Common Core, and we didn't have too much bottom-up discussion of it before it was instituted, and is now at the stage of being implemented. So I wonder if your commission, I agree it would be wonderful to be teaching competencies and to have college teachers talk to high school teachers about what the expectations are and also what could be done. But it seems the train has already left the station, and I'm not as optimistic as it sounds like some members of your commission
Some
are.
members of the commission felt that it was really an important effort. I believe candidly that what moves all of us most of all is stories. And children start to tell stories when they're very little, and they are readers are always fascinated by stories of places long ago and far away, and that's the way you learn. And so I certainly agree with the MLA about their concerns. I also know that the academic societies were not always forthcoming when, for example, history tried to develop a course some years ago, and there was a real tension between the history community and the testing community. And I think we have to roll up our sleeves and go get part of it and not wait till it happens to us. So I'm not saying that I like everything about what's evolved, and I think it's terrific that you've got a K through 16 effort, pre-K even, whose reading readiness is so important. And I do think it's a very important challenge for the MLA and the AHA and others to, get involved in what is a pretty messy system. I have no doubt that in the end people will really resonate to the stories more than anything else. So I hope literature will get restored, and I was worried about the same thing you are.
You know, I actually think science, a lot of science and technology is best taught by stories as well. Narrative is very powerful.
Yeah. And the history of science is often taught almost integral to teaching anything in science.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
The University of California, Davis has a School of Education. I don't want to put you on the spot, however. Could you name maybe 2 or 3 things that you think that school could do in advocacy or curriculum to further the Academy's goals? Thank you.
Schools of education are at a complicated juncture, aren't they? On the one point, we are going to need a whole new generation of thousands of teachers as the current teachers retire. And one thing I think schools of education might be thinking about is how are they going to attract liberal arts college graduates and master's degree and even PhD students into their schools, interest them in curriculum development, but also help them become a part of the schools. I mean, some of the things I was talking about earlier. I am not familiar with the curriculum of UC Davis School of Education, but I am of some schools of education where the theory and the research has almost nothing to do with the practicality of classroom and maybe even attracting people who already have that disciplinary knowledge, but you can help them with cognitive understanding and age-appropriate understanding. And have we all gone into boxes of theory that doesn't like to be so involved with instrumentality? I think schools of education have a wonderful opportunity for them, but I'm not quite sure what drives these schools. And they've also been the targets, I think, of a lot of unfair criticism because of what's happened to teachers. So I think I would push that back to you as a challenge. And I think we should at some point. People are always asking the Academy to do studies on education. Why is education weak in this country? What's wrong with it? And I think people from the education community have to join us if we're going to do that kind of study. I wouldn't presume to really understand exactly where things have gotten somewhat off the rails.
You know, even outside the area of schools of education, I think people in STEM, professionals in STEM, really need to stand up, as the Academy has been doing on our behalf, but we need to stand up and say, we need students who can write, who can articulate a cogent argument, who can be creative and think, just not repeat what they've heard before, but to actually think. We desperately need those skills, and those skills are kind of built on the more humanities side of the equation in K through 12. So I think we can't just leave it to the School of Education. I think the rest of our academic community needs to get more involved.
And when I talk about applied research, I think every discipline in the social sciences ought to have X and education, the economics of education, research on the psychology, neuroscience, all of that will help education schools and educators, but we tend to not value applied research as much as we should in the social sciences. That's from the perspective of the Academy. I think that's one of the areas where interdisciplinary work would be so valuable.
Hi, I'm Sita Shiganti. I'm the director of the Davis Humanities Institute and an associate professor in the English department. And I certainly take the point about the importance of this conversation about secondary education and its relevance to these other questions. I actually have a background as a secondary school teacher before I started my PhD, but I'd like to shift the focus, if I may, to questions about research at the university now. and in particular, interdisciplinarity, which you just brought up in your last response. One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is has been this move towards what I've been calling casually kind of more radical forms of interdisciplinarity, in which humanists are encouraged to reach towards the sciences and vice versa, to come up with collaborative projects that will accommodate these different kinds of approaches. And at one level, I can see the obvious benefits of that. I can see the arguments for it. But at another level, I have skepticism and concern also, partly because disciplinary languages are very different from each other in some ways. And I get concerned about miscommunication and about just mismatches in expertise, in one sense. But I think in some ways the bigger concern for me, and I've started to see this happen, in fact, in some of these kinds of initiatives, is the extent to which the models that the sciences have for how they fund research, for what it's supposed to look like, for how its goals are articulated, can start to take over. There's that potential to take over, and so that those kinds of collaborations potentially have an impact on the being or the identity of humanist research. And I wonder what you think about that, if that's a concern you also have, or how you would respond to that.
I share your concern. But I think science is not as monolithic as it once was. Itself, it's struggling to understand how to talk in each other's language. The divisions between the biological sciences and chemistry and physical sciences are merging in mathematics, and they're beginning to have to struggle with each other's paradigms. The natural sciences paradigm is very different from the biological sciences. We just wrote a report where that was very clear, that engineers are used to a different relationship with industry, for example. They take it for granted in a way that is not so usual in the biological sciences. So I think we're all at a sort of an inflection point. The old doesn't quite hold together, and we're struggling for something new, but I think you're right. There has to be some core of integrity as you come to the table.
And could I add a core of respect? Because if you're trying to engage in a conversation with people who speak different languages, you have to really care about communicating with them and really be motivated to hearing and understanding what they're saying. And what I'm gathering is the experience has been the scientists are more interested in you learning their language and listening to them than the other way around. Is that a reasonable, yeah.
There is a danger that big science put together around problem solving will begin to dominate, and then people doing very cranky, individual, odd pieces of work, whether it's in the humanities or in science, will not be part of the discussion. And yet it's often those individuals who move the paradigm forward yet again. And so I think we need some of both. And I even think people should be able to move in and out of both. That, there might be a great mind program going on for a while, and you're working there, and you get that aha moment, and you want to explore something different. And the agencies, the funding agencies, really have to continue to fund both, because that's where knowledge pushes forward. And not everybody is good in groups.
Well, Dr. Berlowitz, thank you so much for coming. Oh, there is another question. See, I told you I can't see a thing. Thank you.
Oh, actually, Bruce German, professor here at the university, and I wanted to extend that previous question a little bit. I really was inspired by it's not STEM or humanities, it's STEM and humanities. And actually, in that direction, University of California, Davis has a unique opportunity, because we are ag and food, and it's hard to imagine something that would bring all of that together better than the issues around agriculture and food going forward. So I was interested in your ideas as to mechanisms how to fund something like that. I think it is out of the box in a funding sense, in the traditional models of funding. Basic science research and humanities research are where we're finding the biggest problems. Do you have ideas for mechanisms of funding what I think would be an international center of excellence, but how do we get it funded?
Well, funding has become a problem for everybody, so you can all share in that discipline together. And I think sometimes just a very small amount of funding can make some very interesting things happen, where, you know, those aha moments where you can begin to see your influence on each other. Humanities, the funding hasn't really driven the humanities. Humanists were happy with tiny little grants, or no grants at all, but respect and an opportunity to be part of the conversation. The cutback on federal funds for research in science is really very problematic. And so I don't know, a center of excellence around a theme is a terrific way of being and collecting data. There's terrific ways of moving forward in certain nodes. But I also think you have to think about the people who just don't work on food, and how you also embrace them in an institution. I'm worried about all funding being around themes, because themes become like disciplines. Eventually, they can crowd you too. Disciplines, in a way, have languages, but they crowd you. And somebody was saying to me yesterday that the sort of funny thing about the word interdiscipline is that what you're talking about is a discipline and a discipline, and you're talking about that little space. And so we've coined in one of our studies the notion transdisciplinary research, where we bring our disciplines to the table and our expertises and try to begin to understand each other's languages. And I'd love to come to your center when it's thriving. Thank you so much. Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you so much,
It's
Dr.
really-
Berlowitz. Thank you.
Is that all right? Oh, that's
I just wanted to thank you both and remind you that we always have a reception after the lecture. So your questions were very intriguing, and there are many more that I have myself in any ways, or others, I'm sure. But please join us outside for a reception and then continuation of the discussion. Thank you so much.